wherever you may be, thanks for tuning in. I'm joined today by Norman Wolfe. Norman has held several executive roles throughout the corporate world, and over the past 32 years, he has served as CEO of Quantum Leaders, a consulting firm built to serve the needs of organizations in transition. Now, take it from me, I know it firsthand. Change is never easy. It's a fact of corporate life. But change can be a little bit easier with the right roadmap. And with the right roadmap, executives can raise their chances of success when implementing new strategic initiatives. Quantum Leaders gives you that guidance. Norman is also the author of The Living Organization, available on Amazon. The link will be in the description. Norman, thanks for your time.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Hey, Norman, you mentioned a couple of things that sparked my curiosity in our pre-record conversation here. First of all, the idea that organizations are whole entities in and of themselves, these whole-on concept. Zappos is one of these organizations that has implemented the idea of a holacracy. Tell me your approach to viewing organizations and why you think that is the right way for leadership to practice what they do.
Organizations have been thought of for the last 150 years as a machine, a way of organizing people in a very organized structure. I hate to use the word bureaucracy, but in a very structured way. And it was designed for a place and time that it was very much needed. We were going from artisans and agricultural to moving to mass production, where the discoveries, the products being developed could be made available at reasonable prices to the masses of people, which advanced society tremendously. And to do that, we looked at things like economies of scale, mass production, high levels of efficient production. And so we organized around that, and that made a lot of sense. There's certain benefits of that model, and there's certain byproducts of that model. Some of the benefits I already mentioned. Some of the byproducts, what you might call unintended consequences, are that a machine is something that's programmed by somebody. And, as you pointed out, you've got the gozintas, the inputs, and you got the machine doing its thing to it, and then you have an output, right? And you can streamline what goes on inside of it. And it's usually the leadership team that decides how to organize and what the output should be and how that should be and what it should look like and how we allocate resources. And then the people in that organization become part of that executing process, which unconsciously, as I said, an unintended consequence, relegates them to nothing more than an automaton, a cog in the wheel.
Sure.
Again, when you've got a low maturity organization, by that I mean unskilled workers, farmers who are coming into don't have a lot of education and what have you, and that might make a lot of sense. Just like when I'm parenting a child, I'm going to give my 8-year-old more instructions than I would give my 18-year-old, right? Because they don't know. So it makes a lot of sense. But in today's world, where things are changing quickly, where people are much more educated, where there's a desire for a sense of contribution and meaning and purpose in what I do in my life, and especially with the millennials and the Gen Zs, and that's just not working anymore. And so we really have a model that's handcuffing, limiting our ability to be successful. When I looked at that and I said, well, what's a different way to approach it? And looking at my career, as you pointed out, I've been doing this for a long time. I looked at, I realized that in my area where I've been successful and where I have seen other people be successful, they have a different orientation to a business. Most people unconsciously recognize a business has a soul, a purpose, and actually has its own personality. And so I began to extrapolate on that and build on it. And I created, as you mentioned, the book, The Living Organization, and the model. And I've come to believe that the best way to lead an organization is think of it as a person unto itself, like you mentioned. And think of the leadership role more as developing the maturity of this person. And just like you're going through trainings with Vance Caesar, and he's developing you, not just in your skill set on how you do what you do, but who you are being while you're doing what you're doing.
That's right.
Right? He's developing your maturity. So I, as a leader, should think of my organization as my challenge as a leader is to develop the maturity of the organization. And so, and in that way, we've increased what I consider the capacity, and I define capacity as the capabilities that we have combined with the maturity.
Right.
Deal with those capabilities.
Right.
And a friend of mine just added another component when we were talking, we were talking about the performance of an organization is its capacity plus or times its commitment. So if you, and by commitment is, I want to make this happen. I am motivated to make this happen. So if you combine capacity equals maturity plus capability times our commitment, that's what gives you your performance. But that's a formula for a living person, not for a machine. And so I'm all about changing what I call changing the paradigm. It's about start thinking of your organization as a person. When we do workshops, we actually have a portion of our workshop where give your organization a name.
Name it.
Name it.
Okay.
Is it a male or a female?
Okay.
Is it extroverted or introverted?
Okay.
What's its personality type? If you were to introduce, like our company has the nickname QL. We actually went through this exercise with my own company. And it's a bit shy, or it has been shy. And so it's working on becoming a little bit more extroverted.
Okay.
Which is translated into marketing and stuff like that. But it's recognizing it's driven by its underlying belief system, context, point of view of how life works. And that inhibits or enhances our ability to create the outcomes we want. So when we're not getting the outcomes we want within Quantum Leaders, and we call him QL, it is a male. Mm-hmm. It has a very creative context to it. And when we're not getting the results, we'll sit back and saying, what's our underlying context? What's limiting us? What's our limiting beliefs? What are we holding as true, or what are our fears that we're holding? All the things that Coach Vance does with you in helping you move beyond your limiting beliefs. We do that for our organization. And you can only get there if you think of it as a person with a belief set, a context, a personality, and you can begin to help mold it and shape it and mature it.
This sounds like some exercises that I have gone through with marketing professionals, where they sit down with the client and say, if your business, if your product, if your service were a car, what brand would it be? Would it be a Jaguar? Would it be a Ford? What type of car? Is it a sports car? Is it an SUV? Yep. Or they would say, if you had some favorite colors, what would it be and why? If your business, product, service were an animal, what would it be and why? And list out these attributes. When I have conversations with highly data-driven engineers / scientists, they look at that exercise and go, what?
Yeah, right.
That is too warm and fuzzy and too ethereal. But when I have conversations, that type of marketing conversations, I'm not a marketing expert. I'm an OD change management guy. But when I bring in somebody who is a specialist in the marketing world and they have these conversations, if you trust the process and just open up to it, a lot of great information can be pulled out into these sound bites that, with the right leadership development expert like yourself, Norman, like my friend Vance Caesar, with the good OD person, we can then translate that into operational policies for which the organization can then grow into a new personality with direction, if that's what we want.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the marketing thing. I've been fascinated with the fact that marketing has been adopting a lot of principles that come out of human psychology.
Yeah.
And applying it to the marketing efforts. There's a lot of work being done with archetypes in the marketing area. And archetypes come out of Carl Jung's psychoanalytical depth psychology work.
Sure.
But it's recognizing that markets have personalities, companies have personalities.
Yeah.
And we want to communicate the personality of the company to the client. There's another big movement in the sales and marketing domain called customer experience. Unfortunately, see, and this is the problem with shifting the paradigm. And I'll speak to your comment about holacracy and Zappos in a second. But the same thing tends to happen when you introduce a new paradigm. Because paradigms are foundational to people's thinking, it's very difficult to shift it. So when you introduce a new way of thinking, people will tend to, what I call, co-opt and corrupt. They tend to take the idea and fit it into their old paradigm.
Right.
Because the old paradigm is their sense-making mechanism for how the world works. Another example I use, I used to be a ski instructor. And invariably, I always had the beginners for whatever reason. And what I realized is learning to ski is a metaphor for learning a new paradigm of business. And here's the example. If you're walking down the hill full of snow, your body knows, you don't have to think about it, your body knows to lean uphill. Otherwise, if you lean downhill, you're going to fall and die.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it's natural.
You don't have to think of natural. You don't even think about it, it's just instinctual now, right?
Yep.
I come along and say to you, I can get you down the hill faster with a whole lot less efforts. And you go, wow, that's pretty cool. So metaphorically, that's me going to a leader and saying, I can get you more results with less effort and less resources and faster. And they go, oh, that's cool. How do I do that? Going back to my ski example. All you have to do is put these skis on the bottom of your foot and lean over the tips. In other words, lean downhill.
Sure.
And going back to my business example, the analog is, I want you to think of your organization as a living being, not as a machine. And it has a context and a relationship and an activity. And they go, okay, I can understand that. And so going back to skiing, you put on the skis and your body naturally leans uphill. You almost can't stop it because it's already geared for safety and security and success. It's going to do that naturally. And so I go to leaders and I say, all you have to do is, start thinking of your organization as a living person. And they go, okay. And then they start acting like it's a machine.
Right.
Because they are naturally oriented to create results by thinking of it as a set of activities we do. So that's the challenge in shifting a paradigm. And it's what I call, as I said earlier, co-opting and corrupting the new into the old. You look at holacracy as an example. All of their principles are right on. What they're trying to accomplish, self-management, autonomous, operating, self-organizing teams. And they've created a wonderful set of structures and principles to do that.
I hear a however.
There's a however. Just imagine you're part of this team and I'm going to come to you and I'm just going to say, John, I want you to be self-managed. As a matter of fact, I'm dictating to you, you will be self-managed. Is there a little bit of a contradiction there? Where does choice come in? Where does the ability for you to contribute how you want to do your work?
Right.
Instead, holacracy comes in and say, we're going to force you to behave the way we want you to behave. We're going to give you the structure and the boundaries and how you meet and how you define roles and how you resolve tensions and how you account for your work and all of that. And that's going to allow you to operate more freely. And oh, by the way, Tony Hsieh, CEO of Zappos, says everybody's going to do that now. It seems a little contrary to the notion of self-management to me. And it's like I'm dictating to you that you're not going to be dictated to. It seems like almost a contradiction in terms. And I think one of the reasons so many experiments with holacracy and other implementations of self-management is because the principles are being co-opted and corrupted by the old paradigm. We're trying to implement it by the old paradigm. The same thing has happened with the implementation of lean. Same thing with agile. Almost everything that's been implemented has been implemented even though the principles underlying them are very humanistic, very organic. The way they're being implemented and executed is very mechanistic. So we have a disconnect going on.
It's hard for the organization to break free of that.
Absolutely.
Because in the end, the organization has to function under these constraints. The first and foremost thing that the organization has to achieve is shareholder return.
Nope.
You're breaking that paradigm.
I'm breaking that paradigm.
That's so good, because I wanted to talk about the idea of this new structure, this new way of thinking, this new paradigm called stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah, that's another attempt of overlaying some right ideas on in an old model, conscious capitalism, stakeholder models, moving in the right direction. Don't get me wrong. Holacracy, conscious capitalism, stakeholder models are all moving in the right direction. They're just not breaking the paradigm.
They still have to produce return for the shareholders. Are you saying that's irrelevant?
If you go back before 1980, which was really when the major shift happened, it was evolving, but it was like 1980s was like a demarcation.
Yes.
And if you go back to the early days of capital investments, the investor invested in the enterprise because they believed in the impact the enterprise wanted to make.
On the community?
On the community, on society, the contribution they would make to society. That was the original intent. So the capital was a means to the end. It was a resource to the organization making a contribution to society.
That is not what we're taught in the finance departments of MBA schools.
I'm telling you, that's how it started. Now we move forward over time, and Milt Friedman and others of the 1980 ilk said the purpose of a company is to make a return to its owners.
Yes.
And that began a shift in consciousness, a shift in paradigm, a shift in priorities. It wasn't the original intent. So it went from the capital is a resource to facilitate the growth of the organization to the organization as a resource for the investors to make a return on investment. If you look at the venture capital world, they don't really care about what the company's doing. Most, and I'm going to get into trouble here, most venture capitalists really don't care about how successful a company is or isn't.
Right.
They just care about, can I get a return on my investment in the next X period of time?
They are just pursuing above average returns.
That's all they care about. So we've gone from the capital being a resource to the enterprise being a means to the end of the capital markets.
Yes.
We turned everything upside down. I believe that and there's more and more of this happening. There's the whole movement to impact investing, as they call it, which is social investing and all of that. The B Corp movement. There's a big movement to turn that around. And I think eventually we'll get there. But unless we begin to recognize that a business is like a living person, and that every living person is raised, hopefully, in our society to make a contribution to society. Your parents raised you. Vance Caesar is working with you to develop your maturity so you become a good citizen, a responsible human being, a responsible citizen that facilitates your ability to make the contribution you were born to make, whatever that is. If it's working with people,
Sure.
if it's becoming a creative artist, if it's whatever it is, the purpose of life is for you to express your unique gift.
Let me let me just play Milton Friedman advocate, Frederick Hayek advocate for a second.
Go ahead.
And I'm doing this only because I think you already understand my ethos. So just to take the other side of this,
Please.
does not capital deserve to have an above average return? Because here's the thing, Norman, we can't pay rent with goodwill. We pay rent with surplus capital. If we don't make a profit, we don't contribute back to our citizens in the organization.
You drew a false conclusion to my statement. I'm not against making profit. As a matter of fact, you have to make profit. I've been chairman of the board of nonprofits, and the first thing I teach nonprofits is you have to make a profit. Look, the model of every living entity is you are there to create value to somebody. That value is exchanged. However you want to use exchange.
Okay.
In our society, it's money.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
To create that thing of which I contribute value, whether I'm an artist and I make a painting, or whether I'm a consultant and I give my knowledge, or
Yes.
whether I'm a producer of nuts and bolts and I'm selling, high quality nuts and bolts, or low cost nuts and bolts, whatever my reason for existing is.
Yes.
I produce value for which I get something in return. We call that revenue. I consume resources, I consume energy in the production of that, in the production of or the creation of that, whether it's paint or time or whatever it is, there's energy consumption. We call that expenses.
Yes.
Revenue minus expenses, whatever's left over, is the resource I have for investing into growing my ability to contribute.
Yes.
Right? That's the basic formula.
Right.
You can call it whatever you want. Now, to a point that I said to a friend who said, Norman, if you don't, he's how do you say? He said, if you don't put fuel in the car, you can't go anywhere. I said, absolutely.
Fair enough.
But the purpose of the car is not to get fuel. The purpose of the car is to take me from point A to point B.
That's not a bad analogy.
So the purpose of a business is not to create profit. The purpose of the profit is to help me go from point A to point B. Again, we turned everything upside down. We made the money, the profit, the creation of the creation of a return on capital as the end goal. It's not the end goal. The end goal is making a contribution to society.
It appears, though, Norman, again, let me play devil's advocate. It appears, though, when we prioritize profits as organizations, when we prioritize for the efficient return on capital, make return on capital as efficient as possible. When we do that, we seem to have surplus capital, more surplus capital than if the model were the other way around. It seems that way.
Well, look, as an engineer years ago, I used to design test systems, and I actually used to program the monitoring systems on the tests that we were running. The information that I was providing was very useful to helping the engineers design an efficient product.
Sure.
Right? If I was to apply your example to it, then what's really important is that the whole purpose of the effort between me and the engineer was for me to have an efficient measurement system. No, that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is for the engineer to design an efficient process. If you go back and look at things like Enron, we came up with a whole profession called financial engineering.
Yes.
And what's the purpose of a financial engineer? To find ways to manipulate, excuse if the word's harsh, the measurement systems so it looks like the system under test that the measurement system is designed to measure looks good. Right? That's like me speeding down the freeway and the speedometer's going 120 miles. And I go, oh, I don't like that. I'm going to call in my financial engineer and they're going to adjust it. And it's going to look like it says 60. Hey, cool, I'm only going 60. And then I crash and burn and the cop goes, you were doing 120 miles. No wonder why you killed 40 people. Well, no, my speedometer said 60. That's what we've been doing since 1980s. We've been getting better and better at the find, because what's important is the measurement of the capital. We want to make now, don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing that efficient use of capital isn't important. Remember my basic formula, consumption of resources, I want to make that as efficient as possible. I want to do more with less. And I want my measurement system to show me where I'm not doing more with less, where I'm wasting, where I'm expending extra energy, where I'm utilizing resources. That's the purpose of efficient capital. It's an indicator. But when we make that the primary goal, then I'm going to spend a lot of time making it look as good as I can.
Right.
So what we've done over the years is by elevating the measurement system over the operating system, we've actually caused more problems than we've solved. It's not to say that a good measurement system isn't important. It's just, where's your priority? What are you really looking at? And that's been the problem with shareholder value, and and stakeholder value. Well, that's a whole nother conversation. Just to stay with the Milton, that's the problem with shareholder value. It's turned it upside down.
In all honesty, I think you already
know you
that.
Agree with me.
I agree with you. There is this famous clip of Milton Friedman justifying the risk analysis of the Ford Pinto. And if X payouts for lawsuits are below the additional cost of implementing a particular safety cell for the fuel tank, then we should allow for these particular payouts. In other words, we accept death over profits.
Yep.
That's bananas to me. That's absolutely asinine.
But if you think of life as a mechanistic entity, there is no place. There is no place in a machine paradigm for humanness. It's just a machine.
Right.
People are just interchangeable parts. And quite frankly, that's why unions were formed, right? Because people were just interchangeable parts. So they said, wait, we need somebody to say, no, we're human beings. We want to be treated like human beings, right?
Right.
So unions were formed. And then unions became mechanistic, if you will. Again, every system we design is is flawed. Even the living organization will over time show its shortcomings. That's the nature of evolution.
Yes.
You design something for the time and space you're living in, and then when it's time for it to die, you move on. Newtonian physics was an advance in science, bar none, until it stopped answering questions. Then you had to add on to it and create quantum physics.
Yes.
All I'm saying is machine paradigm was great at enhancing what we call the activity field, and it optimized it. We don't throw away the activity field, we have to enhance it. You are more than just your physiology. You are more than the pressure and the flow of blood through your system and the electrical currents and the chemical reactions. That's the way we look at an organization. And business in general, it's just a collection of the parts. But when you consider it as a human being, it takes on a whole different quality. It enhances it. It doesn't throw away the organs and the blood flow and the electrical currents. It just adds on to it and enhances it. Ken Wilber's definition, I don't know if it's his or I heard it from him. Evolution is the adding on to and enhancing that which came before. And that's the way I look at the living organization. It's adding on to and enhancing, overcoming the limitations that the existing paradigm currently has.
Let me see if I can wrap this, because
Sure.
we're up against our time here. For the sake of our audience here, you are not saying organizations should not be profitable. That is not the Norman Wolfe philosophy.
That is absolutely not the Norman Wolfe philosophy.
What you're saying is optimizing, maximizing for profits. There is a trade-off and a cost to that. And that trade-off and that cost, when you arrange and organize your institutions to maximize profits, can be human well-being.
No, I wouldn't even go that far. I would say, the way I would say it is, the problem we have since the 80s and that we're facing is the measurement system has become more important than that which is being measured. That's one problem.
Yes.
The second problem is that the current way of operating the organizations is actually ignoring certain energies that when applied could actually make the organization achieve a lot more with less effort, therefore further maximizing return on investment and profit. And if you look at the living organization model, it actually introduces a way of working with these other energy fields that are being ignored and causing organizations to waste money, time, and energy. So I'm actually advocating streamlining, making organizations more effective. I don't want to say the word efficient, or I should say efficient and effective.
Okay.
To be able to apply, it's the metaphor I used earlier where I said, imagine you're rowing across the river and there's this thing called current, but you don't know anything about it.
Right.
And you're working so hard to get across the river, and every time you row, you're being pulled downstream. So you got to row upstream, and then you're being pulled downstream, row back upstream, and eventually you get across, but you use all this effort. Now imagine if you can turn the current to go the direction you want to go. How much quicker can you get across with less effort? That's what the living organization does. It helps you turn the current to flow in the direction you want to go. And that's actually increases your profit. So I am absolutely not against profit. If anything, I'm out for making you more money easier.
Making more money easier. Sometimes I have these conversations with particular MBA students when I come in to do guest lectures. Management, leadership, which is the tip of the iceberg, which is the rest of the iceberg. And they invariably say, well, management is the tip of the iceberg, leadership is the rest of the iceberg underwater that you really don't see. And I said, yes, you're all correct. But trick question was, you forgot about the culture of the organization. The culture of the organization is the current that pushes the iceberg along.
Yep.
And if you forget about that, you are forgetting about a huge piece of the organization that is real, that can be tangible, can be felt viscerally, that gives you the opportunity to shape and become better than your competitors.
And if you want to know how to create culture, go look at the living organization model, because we know how culture is created and how a leader can actually consciously create a different culture.
Well said, Norman. Well said. My fellow durable leaders, thank you for joining us. Norman, thank you for your time. You guys absolutely need to reach out to Norman on LinkedIn. Follow him. I will put a link of his profile down in the description, and I will also put a link to the Living Organization available on Amazon. I'll put that link in the description as well. Thank you for joining us. Norman, thank you for your time.
It's been quite an exciting conversation. Thank you, John. It's been a pleasure. And do say hello to Vance for me.
I will do.